would you like to put in some coordinates?
Not all who wander are lost.
Well, I am not sure you can consider yourself a strider if you are simply floating in space.
Just hold here, okay? Oh, hey there. Welcome to the Nerdy Photographer Podcast. I'm your host, Casey Fatchett. If you've never listened to the show before, welcome. If it's your second time listening to the show, congratulations on finding your way back to us. In addition to providing entertaining and informative photography-related information, I also go on adventures with the crew of the Starship Fibonacci. Right now, the crew and I are on an assignment to document some rare space whales, and while Fibonacci thinks we have to choose an exact location, I see this as a moment to let the galactic currents pull us where they will.
You do not want to admit that you do not know where they are.
No one knows. That's why sightings of them are so rare, and we're not floating aimlessly. Think of it as planned meandering. On a similar note, in this episode of the podcast, I speak with Kirsten Smith about pursuing her love of photography by taking a year to wander the globe. From financing to logistics, we hit a lot of important topics for people looking to travel the world taking pictures. All of that after the break.
Whale song detected off the starboard bow.
Well, how about that? Hey there, listeners. It's time for what I like to call a little shameless self-promotion. After years of planning and trying to get this project done, I have finally launched my online print shop. Yes, you can buy prints of my photos. That way you can support a small business and the podcast at the same time. Just head over to the link in the episode notes and check it out. There are photos from Scotland, Italy, France. There's wildlife photos. There are amazing flower photos. And there are photos of the city I called home for 20 years, New York City. So many pictures to choose from, and there are more coming as I get the time to process them and edit them and get them online. You can choose from fine art prints, metallic prints, acrylic prints, and there are tons of sizes to choose from, whatever you might need. So, what are you waiting for? Bring some beauty to your walls and some inspiration to your life with a print from my fine art print shop. Just click on the link in the episode notes. Go do it. Hello, and welcome to the Nerdy Photographer Podcast. I am your host, Casey Fatchett, and we're here today with Kirsten Smith. Kirsten, welcome. Thank you for coming on the show. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
We're going to start off with the dice breaker. Rolling the die. 17 best photography or business advice you've ever received.
One of the best pieces of advice that I've received in relation to what I specifically do is always try to tell a story. When I first started, I was not really, I wasn't telling stories. I'm a writer. I write novels. I write children's books. I write a blog and I write for a living. But I also am a photographer, and after learning that advice, I kind of started to marry those things together. And when I shoot, I will go out looking for a story. Not all the time, but some of the time. And it really leads to some interesting results. And so I kind of really value that advice.
Yeah, I think that finding the story, it's one of the things that I try to tell people when they're trying to get better at photography, specifically. Like I use it a lot with wedding photography stuff. And they say, oh, what exercises can I do to improve what I'm doing? And I always give them the what I call the film roll exercise. You can only take 36 exposures, or you can take 24 exposures, or you can take 12 exposures or 10 exposures. But whatever it is, you're not taking a bunch of pictures and then like going back and I'm only choosing 12 or 24 or 36, whatever. It's that you're only allowed to shoot that number of exposures, and that's it. You're done. And you have to tell your story. You're going to have to tell your story in that number of images, and it really makes you think about the story that you're trying to tell, and focus on that as opposed to just I'm going to go out and just take a bunch of pictures and like see what comes of those, and if there's something interesting in there, then I then that's great. Otherwise, it's sort of like, you sort of go out there and all you're doing is pressing the shutter button and hoping it all kind of comes together and into something.
Yeah. And honestly, I think that platforms like Threads and Instagram are really good at helping you learn how to tell a story because you only get 10 frames on each of those platforms. And it's nice to be able to tell a story even if it's a progression or if it's, just a theme that you're going for. It makes you think about telling stories as you're shooting, which is a really helpful tool.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things I love about the carousel of photos is the like watching like a progression of images and being like, oh, like something sort of opens up, and like, as you get to the third one that was like just off screen when you were starting to scroll through on Threads, or you scroll through on Instagram and you get to like a photo and you're like, oh, this is what's going on, and I don't know. I'm trying to think of. I keep thinking entertaining, but that's not the word that I really mean. But I think you know what I'm trying to get across.
Yeah.
So there's
Oh,
it's
totally.
the build up, the excitement is different than when you get to that next image. So
Yeah.
you decided to leave your corporate job and pursue a year of traveling, photography, and writing. What inspired you to do that? Was it a gradual decision, or was it sort of a moment of realization and clarity, or what inspired that choice?
So it was a series of things that built up over time, but the inciting incident, if you will, happened during a trip to Victoria Falls, Zimbabwe. My best friend and I kept running into this older gentleman named Mike. He was an Australian businessman. Mike was actively doing a lot of the things that I had always dreamed of doing. He traveled all over the world. He'd written a bunch of books and screenplays, and he was a very good photographer. And we had dinner with him one night. He invited us to his big fancy hotel, and he was kind enough to treat us to dinner, which was nice because we were very broke at that time. Um, and I told him that I wanted to do the things that he was doing someday too. And he basically said, well, then do them. It's not that hard. And I'm like, ha ha, I wish. And he asked me what was stopping me. And I said the usual things. I'm not a real artist. I have a job and bills to pay. I'm not rich. I won't be able to do any of those things until I retire. And he said, if you want to go do those things, find a way. If you want something, you have to go out and get it. It is not going to just be handed to you on a silver platter. You can do it, so go do it. And that just blindsided me. I was like, whoa, I've never heard anyone talk like this before. And it really got the wheels turning. So when I got home, I started doing research on how to travel the world on a budget. And I found a lot of like solo travel communities and blogs online with people from all ages. Like I'm talking college students to retirees. People were doing these, traveling for long periods of time. And so I started to form a plan. I figured it would take me something like 6 months to a year to save enough to travel for 1 year on a very small budget. And I asked a friend to cat sit an apartment sit for me for the year. And they took over my rent for me, which was really nice. And I stored a bunch of my stuff. I sold my car. I bought a small laptop to work on. And by the time the end of 6 months, it was actually more like 7 months, came around, I was ready to go. I'd saved enough and I just went. And I started in Spain. And if you want, I can actually list off all the
Sure.
countries I
Yeah.
visited here. Okay. Spain, Portugal, Morocco, Egypt, Turkey, Greece, Croatia, Hungary, Ireland, Singapore, Nepal, India, Sri Lanka, Indonesia, Malaysia, Cambodia, Vietnam, Colombia, Ecuador, Panama, Costa Rica, Mexico, Cuba, home.
Wow. Is that in order?
That wasn't in order. I can't remember them in order. It starts in order, but then it kind of gets off track when I get to Asia.
Yeah, I was saying like, wait, it went from like Ireland to Singapore, and I was like, wow, that's a
That is
big.
true. I actually did do that. I went from there was a very long flight, but my friend was had a wedding in Ireland, so I met up with her there, did that, and then it was time to go to Asia.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, it boggles my mind to like be on the road that long. Like, I love to travel, but like, there's something about like being moving, keeping moving for an entire year. What were some of the biggest, I don't know, fears or like challenges that you faced when you were like planning or doing it, like while you were on your travels?
You know, I will say, in hindsight, a year was a very long time. And I was living on a shoestring. I was staying in hostels, and it was really tough sometimes. Like, I didn't know, it was just difficult. Like, I didn't know where to get groceries because I was always most trying to cook as many of my meals as I could to save money. Um, and I didn't speak the language in a lot of places. It was tough, but it was also completely awesome. Um, as far as fears, I was absolutely riddled with fears. I was afraid of having a year-long gap on my resume. I was afraid of running out of money. I was afraid for my safety, being a very small female solo traveler. For that part, I actually did a lot of research on how to stay safe on the road. And by the time I left, I had learned a lot from other female travelers, and I felt very prepared. My dad, my dad, of course, was sending me a lot of news articles about people getting kidnapped. Um, but my mom actually thought it was really, really neat that I was just going. She was really proud of me. So I told her about all my safety precautions, including like travel insurance in case I got sick or injured. And she felt much better about it. My solution for my fears and challenges is pretty much always to educate myself, like do the research, find out what to stay vigilant about wherever I am. Know the local scams because there's a lot of places where it's just like a certain type of scam happens a lot. So just be aware of that. Know what parts of the city to avoid. Find out if the water is safe to drink, things like that.
Yeah, research. Research is
Totally.
such a like a. I feel like I, this is a common theme amongst people I've talked to or interviewed when we talk about traveling or just like when you're going to new places. It's researching, and I think that that's one of those things that is a lost art.
Oh yeah.
Where people don't really know how to, sit down and like I see younger and younger photographers who want to do these things, and their response is like, I'm going to watch a YouTube video on it. And, your YouTube video is only as good as the person who's making the YouTube video. Uh,
That's correct.
so you really have to, like, I think multiple sources of information.
Yeah.
Now,
Oh, yeah, like, I got really good at knowing exactly where to go to find out what I needed to know. Like, there was a handful of there's actually a big community of travel influencers, I guess you would say now. It would be, like, travel blogs and YouTube and a mix of regular websites. There's a there's a lot of places I learned to go to find exactly the kind of information I was looking for. It was very helpful.
now you're still traveling. I mean, you're back working a corporate gig, but you're also still traveling and taking photos. How do you plan your travel and photography? Or do you come up with a specific itinerary for where you're going, or do you kind of get there and like let inspiration sort of like guide you as for? We talked about like writing a story, like or like coming up with the story for what you're trying to create. Like have you worked that out before you go on the trip, or is it something you get to like to your destination and you're like, okay, what's the story I'm going to tell now that I'm here? Or do you kind of leave room for improvisation when you get there after having a set itinerary?
It's a little bit of both sometimes. Like, when I went to Kathmandu, Nepal, I knew that I wanted to take a flight to Mount Everest. And so I was already prepared for that story. But I also went to Pokhara, Nepal, and Chitwan, Nepal, where there's a national park. And I just knew those things were there. So I knew I should be looking for a story when I got there, but it was mostly waiting for inspiration and just kind of keeping my eyes open, feeling it out, seeing what kind of story might kind of pop up. There are things that I do whenever I go practically anywhere. Most places in the world have free walking tours, and so I almost always do that. It's a really, really good way to get the lay of the land, find out the places you want to return to later. And the tour guides are really, really great for telling you where to go, where to avoid. And it's also a really nice way to meet people. When I was traveling for the whole year, my some of my friends did meet up with me, which was wonderful, but most of the time I was on my own. So I would use free walking tours and other tours as well to meet people, which was very, oh my gosh, it was a lifesaver. I don't know what I would have done. I made so many friends on the road that if I hadn't, I would have been so much, I would have been in bad shape. But it was great because I did meet new people and made a lot of friends that way.
That's great. I mean, I think that's, I don't know, and it's such a, I don't know, being on the road for a year kind of gives you such a great in for conversation with people that you meet. Like, what are you doing? Oh, I'm traveling for a year to, just travel and take pictures and come up with stories. That's amazing. So like I mentioned, you've since gone back to working your non-photography job to help finance traveling and doing these sorts of things. And how do you balance the two things, like having the traveling and work? I think this is something that I really want to dive into this a little bit because, I mean, I'm a professional photographer and this is what I do for a living. This is my job. And I interview people who are on both sides of it, people who are both, who are either like professionals and that's their job. And this is 100% what they dedicate all of their time to. And there are people who this is like their thing that they love to do. And they balance that with a job. And I want other people out there who listen and know this, like who aren't professionals necessarily, like in the sense of not professional, but like meaning this isn't their 100% of their time is dedicated to this. How you can like balance your life and make room for both of these things, like with your regular job and your photography.
Yeah. So I'm working on the assumption that the art life, to call it that, the art life will probably not pan out financially for me. I mean, maybe it will, but I have to plan on it not doing that. So basically, I don't want to be on my deathbed without having really tried to live the life that I dream of. Life is too short to not give myself that gift, that opportunity to see if I can do the things that I love, writing and photography and travel, given the resources of time and financial safety. I fear not having the option to spend more of my life doing what I love, which a lot of people feel that way. So, right now, I'm kind of executing a long term plan to use my corporate 9 to 5 to prepare for a more full time art life, not now, but very soon. For right now, I just do my art when I can. I do my photography, I do my travel, I do my writing when I can. It's on the weekends. It's like I dedicate at least one day of the weekend to one or all of those things if I can. It doesn't always work out. I try to balance it with rest and with seeing my friends. As far as travel, I do try to get out of the country at least once a year, but I have a plan. I'm in about year 10 of a 15-year hardcore saving and investing kind of mission that will help me reach FIRE, which stands for Financial Independence Retire Early, by the time I'm 50, which is in 5 years. So if your listeners aren't familiar with FIRE, you can Google it. There is a huge community of people around the world who are doing exactly what I'm doing. So it's basically all to be able to spend more time doing what inspires you, what you really love. Um, this can apply to people who are retiring soon. This can apply to people who are in the workforce, just like I am. Like, you can take breaks, you can take gaps, and can retire early if you want to. And that's my plan. I would like to get out of the rat race, but I need to do it responsibly
Right.
so that I'm protecting my older self.
Yeah.
I don't want to be homeless when I'm 90.
Yeah. It's
So,
and I'm familiar with FIRE, and
oh, great.
it's a, I don't know. I'm seeing as like photography is one of the things I love to do. Like, there's part of me is like, am I really going to be retired? And my wife and I talk about it, like, are you going to stop taking pictures at some point? And like, no, it might change. The face of it might change, and like what I do, what I spend my time on, I think will probably change a lot. But I think that it is that. I think a lot of people are scared, especially young people are scared of like what the financially what things are going to look like, and coming up with a plan is I am a planner. I gotta like get everything like laid out in front of me and go like, okay, so I'm taking care of like these possibilities, because I completely agree with you. Life is short. You gotta get out there and live it. And my wife and I decided, like, we're gonna travel, we're gonna do things, we're not gonna wait for retirement to travel and do the things that we like to do. We set aside the time. We're gonna like go visit this location, or we're gonna go to this country, or we're gonna, do whatever thing. We set aside the time to do that, and we are lucky enough to be able to do those things. Just because you never know how much time you've got. Don't just sit around working 100% of the time.
Right.
You have to take some. You have to get out there and do things and experience things, and not just spend all the time working. So
Ooh, like, this isn't written in stone. There's nowhere where there is a law that says everyone has to do this the same way. Like, you can do it. You can take mini retirements. A lot of people do that. Some people consider my year of travel a mini retirement. And or you can keep working. My mom is close to 80 years old. She loves her job. She teaches organic farming to college students in Michigan, and she loves it so much she doesn't even want to stop. And that is wonderful. But it's a little different for me. Like, I do love my job. I'm so fortunate to have a job that I really enjoy, with people I enjoy, for a company I enjoy. But I also prioritize I prioritize my art, and I prioritize travel, and I have to find a way to do that. And working on novels is really hard when you only do it one day of the weekend.
yeah,
It's there are ways to do it, and we can be creative, and it doesn't have to be done the same way for
yeah,
everyone.
yeah. Everybody could have a different approach to it. And you mentioned we had discussed it off camera, or not off camera, off the microphone. They were both originally from Michigan.
Yep.
Midwesterners uniting. So I have to say, when I first saw your photos, and I think the first ones that I saw were the frozen flowers that really just like, I don't know, something about them spoke to me. It was the macro along with like the just frozen flower. I love flowers. Um, I have a question today, because this is something that I have trouble with myself when I go places. How do you balance the photography part with actually experiencing the place that you visit?
It can be hard. I do have to occasionally remind myself to be present. When I was traveling, I was treating my travel blog like a job. So I was writing at least one or two posts per week, and I kind of did treat a lot of my tours like part of my job, even though I loved it, and I really, it was wonderful. I'm so lucky to have been able to do it, but I took it very seriously. And I do have to, and did have to, remind myself to put the camera away, soak up the vibes of a place, just be still. A lot of the times I'll go to a cafe, I'll just put my camera in my backpack and I'll ignore it and just listen to what's around me and just soak it in. Yeah, I do have to remind myself to do it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's one of those things that my wife will stop me and say like, "Hey, maybe you need to put the camera down for a couple minutes and like realize where you're at." And that's where there are times sometimes when I take my camera with me, but there are sometimes I don't even take it out because there are some things. It's sort of like, I don't know if you're familiar with the Secret Life of Walter Mitty,
Yes.
the Ben Stiller version of it. Like, but when Sean O'Connell has that moment with the snow leopard, and he's just like, sometimes it's just for me, and like that moment, like in that film, like really spoke to me as a photographer, where I was like, I have not been at that point in my life. I had not been taking those moments for myself and just sort of like, this is something that doesn't need to be captured on camera. This is just something I need to experience.
Oh yeah, I had that feeling a lot of times. Um, for example, I went to Morocco, and two of my friends went with me, and the three of us did a camel trek into the Sahara Desert to sleep under the stars in a traditional Berber tribe camp. And I mean, this was you see ads for like really fancy versions of this. This was not fancy. This was very, very rustic and real. And I did bust out my camera, but I waited until the next day. When we got to this camp, our guide Mohammed made us a traditional kind of Moroccan dish, and then he taught us how to play like the bongos, the Moroccan bongos, and he was singing, and I am so happy that I have basically zero photos of that. It's all in my mind. It's just in my memory because I was being present. I'm so glad I did that. I hope I remember that until I'm dead. Like I hope I remember it even without the photos, and I think I will because I really was extremely present. And you have moments like that when you're traveling where it's just so amazing what is happening that taking out a camera and making that shutter click just takes you out of the moment, and it takes other people out of it too.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you're with your friends or your spouse, like it is jarring sometimes. Sometimes you just have to be still and just absorb it.
Yeah, there's this really reminds that what you said reminded me of a moment that I had last time my wife and I went to Scotland, and we went to the islands of Lewis and Harris, which are way up off the northwest coast. And I might actually do like a series of episodes on that because I've been
That'd be cool.
writing the experience, because it had a lot. It was weird because it was the year after, it was 2021. We were supposed to go for was it 2021 or 2022? I'm trying to remember now because we were supposed to go for our 10-year anniversary, and then we couldn't because of the pandemic. I think we went in 2022. But in the whole, like this, we stayed in this lodge, and we were with a bunch of other people, like not a bunch of other people, like 8 other people. And this family style dining, like everybody ate at the same table, and we were eating, and these stags were like running outside, like in the sunset, and like, and I went, somebody was like, "Get your camera, Casey, get your camera." And like, all those people were at the table were like, "Oh, go get a picture of that." And I went to take a picture, and I just sort of like went, "What am I got a couple pictures, and I just thought, like, what am I doing? I should be inside with the people enjoying this meal and whatever." And like, then two of them like ran out after the stags, like trying to chase the stags where we were. And then they had a few scotches at that point. But then we just spent the night all like all of us spent the night in the parlor of this lodge talking around a fire, and just it was one of the greatest experiences of my life, with
Yeah.
like these kind of not really strangers, because we'd all met at breakfast and talked and introduced ourselves. We had had dinner with many of them the night before, but we were up until like 3 or 4 a.m. just all talking and having, a wonderful time. And I'm glad that my camera didn't get in the way of it, because I was just like, yeah, there's sort of this feeling of like, oh, I have to document this.
Yeah.
We're in this place. I'm like, no, I can't document this. This is it will somehow ruin the moment. Um,
And I think things like that, those really do stick with you, even if you don't have photos of it. Like that feeling of connection with these perfect strangers, like I wouldn't be surprised if you still talk to some of them. There's been
yeah,
people that
you do.
that's
Um,
amazing.
it's also funny is that I'm not going to give it away if I do a story. There's actually I'll tell you when we're off. There's a really interesting part to this, but I will leave it for listeners to discover whenever I get around to telling the story, uh, specifically that story. So, have there been any unexpected obstacles that you've come across in your travels that have, or challenges that you've faced while you were traveling, that you had to find a way to overcome? Like we've kind of talked about the wonderful experiences of it, but like, have there been any significant trials and tribulations that have come up along the way that you had to find a workaround for?
Oh my God, all of the time. It seemed like almost every day I was having to solve some kind of problem. Um, be it like when I was in Vietnam, I was trying to get from Ho Chi Minh City up towards Sapa in the north. And that's Sapa is the area where you see all the beautiful golden rice paddies and stuff like that. But I was doing it really cheap, right? So I was taking local buses, chicken buses. Literally, there was chickens on the bus, and for some strange reason, the bus that I was on stopped in the middle of traffic. It was a traffic jam, and everybody got off the bus, and I didn't understand why we were getting off the bus, and we were told to get on a different bus, and nobody spoke English. This was a local bus. This wasn't a tourist bus, and I'm like trying to get somebody to tell me, are we still going in north? Where is this bus going to take me? And it was like getting dark out, and I was like, oh man, this is going to be an adventure. And luckily, it did get me to the right place. Although when it dropped me off, it was kind of in the middle of nowhere, and there was this motorcycle taxi, quote unquote, and he basically price gouged me. He was just like he asked for a huge amount of money to get me to my hotel in this was actually Halong Bay. And so I had no choice. I had to do that. So it's things like that. But I did actually get very sick when I was in Indonesia. I was staying on an island called Gili Air Island, and it was 3 hours by boat from the mainland. And I must have drank some bad water.
Mm.
Somehow I got really, really sick. I could barely walk. I was bedridden, and I was there by myself. This part of my journey had no friends with me. And so it was scary being by myself and being that sick. But the guy at the hotel was really, really nice. He kept checking on me. And at one point he goes, "You need to go to the hospital." And I was like, "Oh man, I bet it's malaria," because I, like an idiot, had forgotten to take my malaria pills in advance. And so I'm like, "Oh man." I looked at the symptoms of malaria. "Oh, I have all of those symptoms. It's gotta be malaria." So they basically this guy was just the nicest person. You meet so many nice people when you travel. The world is filled with nice people. This man chopped up a bunch of fresh ginger, and I have since learned that ginger is medicine.
Yeah.
And so he was like, just keep popping these little pieces of ginger on the boat. It will help you with the nausea. And so I did that, and I got to the mainland, and I had to take another long taxi ride to the hospital. I finally got there. I walked in, and the doctors took one look at me, and they're like, dengue fever.
Ooh.
and I was like, oh no, that sounds worse. So they did a bunch of tests on me, and they gave me an IV, hydrated me. And after a few hours, they came back and they were like, we have great news. It is not dengue. It is not malaria. It is Bali belly.
What is
Anyone
that?
who's been to India has
Oh.
probably heard of Delhi belly. It's the same thing.
So is that food poisoning, or is that?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
That's what I guessed.
Yeah, that's crazy. And then this one other time, this is the last one, last story. So I went to Cuba at a time when Americans were not really supposed to be going to Cuba. But I had read that if you go in through Mexico,
If you enter from another country. Yeah.
Yes, precisely. So if you go in, and they recommended Mexico, so I went in through Mexico, and you're supposed to tell when you get there, they're supposed to ask you, do you want a stamp in your passport? And you're supposed to say no. And so they let you in, and so I got in. Whew, so glad. And then I did what I always do. I go straight to the ATM to pull out local money so that I am prepared. And the ATM, which is the only one on the whole island that takes American debit cards, was broken. And I looked at the security guard. I'm like, is there another one? And he's just like, I don't know. Nope. So I basically had whatever cash was with me. I had $100 in US dollars, and that needed to last me for 8 days. And I got to my Airbnb, and they were like, the lady was so nice. She was like, Christina, you have to have money. You have to, my husband is going to take you to someplace where you can change your money into Cuban kooks. And so this guy wound me through these back alleys, and they were all the streets were being dug up, and all these electrical wires were exposed because Obama was coming, and they wanted the lights to be bright for Obama in the streets. So everything was torn up, and so I'm jumping over these ditches to get to this really strange little store that was had a big curtain in the middle of it, and on the other side of the curtain I could see a bunch of dudes, old men, sitting around smoking cigars and gambling. So I don't know what this place was, but the guy helped me jump the line, and because there was a huge line of people waiting to change their money. So I got there, and he was able to get my money changed for me. And so, but they took a cut, so I was down to $90 to get me through 8 days of needing food and everything. And yeah, it's stuff like that is really, really, you don't see it coming, and you just have to find a way to deal with it. And I was speaking of Scotland. There was a Scottish couple staying at my Airbnb, and they were the kindest people. They gave me $100 in Cuban money. Just gave it to they slipped it under my door so that I wouldn't starve. And I was so grateful, and I paid them back later, but I was just so grateful. People are so kind, but it's things like that happen, and you just have to like roll with it.
Yeah, you have to just figure out what you're going to do.
Yep.
So these experiences, both the stressful and the amazing that you've had on your travels, how have they changed your approach to, well, photography and also life in general?
So the goal of my big round the world trip was basically to learn the art of travel writing and to try to learn to shoot like National Geographic photographers. Like I said, I treated my blog like it was a job. I took it really seriously. And what I learned about myself along the way is of I'm more capable in general than I ever thought I could be. I also learned to be a better storyteller. Um, I was looking for stories as I was shooting, and I knew I had to kind of like fashion a story from things as I went. So I learned to be a better storyteller. I learned to handle anything that came up. Um, and I felt brave enough to let go of society's expectations of me. Like, I realized that I don't have to do a 9 to 5 job for 40 years like everyone. We just do that in America. That's what we expect. There's a way out of that. I learned that I don't have to do the things that everyone does. Like, I don't have to get married. I don't have to have kids. I don't have to get the nice car, the expensive house, the picket fence, the dog. I can make things up for my own life that works for me. And I can travel as much as I want as long as I'm still healthy to do it. I can make my own dreams come true. Like, this is something I can do. And that was one of the best things I learned. I learned that I can do things according to my own life. I don't have to do things the way other people do it, which was really nice.
On that note, I want to say that your style, your photographic style, really sticks out to me because I think, unique. They're like I looking at your photos, both on Instagram and Threads. I was just like really taken with how there is a really unique. There is a uniqueness to your photos, and like the like intentional camera movement and the macro stuff. Like this is not like, when I look at your photos, I'm like, yes, like that is a distinct style that is yours. Like, I have not seen like someone in this realm of photography that you're in that does things in that way. And I think that is like speaks to your own creativity. And I just wanted you to hear that and let you know.
Thank you. That really means a lot. Yeah, I guess I do kind of have a style that is very unusual, and I have to say, like, I joined Threads like a little over a year ago, maybe a year and a half ago, and I have been so inspired. Like, the artists that are on there, many of whom you've interviewed, like Dimitri Mack, are just so inspiring. And it, I can't help but let it affect my own work. It drives me to do things that I never would have done, like the ice flowers, the
Yeah.
flowers in ice. Where did that even come from? Like, oh my gosh, but it was so fun. And that is one of the reasons that I'm doing this whole plan of mine, like, that I wanna give myself more time to do crazy, interesting, different things like that. Um, I I could be doing so much more if I had more than 1 day per week to work on it, and it makes me feel so alive. Uh, the things that I love that I've been talking about, the travel, the writing, the photography, these are the things that make me feel alive. And they just, it's just so much fun for me to do unusual things. And I want to do more of it.
Awesome. So what advice would you give to people who are considering either leaving their 9 to 5 jobs or like opening themselves up more to their artistic side along with their 9 to 5 to pursue their creative passions?
My advice is the same advice that I was given by Mike the Australian when I was in Africa all those years ago. And that is, if you want something, you have to find a way to go out and get it. You have to prepare. Start preparing right now, today, and educate yourself. Do the research. How are other people doing what you want to do? What sacrifices have they made? What sacrifices or adjustments do you need to make in the short term so that you can achieve your goal in the long term? We are a very instant gratification kind of society, but things like this can really require patience and determination and discipline and planning. So my advice to people is just keep your eyes on the prize. Give yourself that gift, that opportunity. Know what you want and don't stop until you're there.
Hey there, Nerdy Photo Crew. There's one thing you should never be caught without as a professional photographer, and that's a good contract, both for dealing with your clients and dealing with subcontractors that you may work with along the way. Be sure to head over to nerdyphotographer.com and go to our shop and find our contract templates for portrait photography, event photography, wedding photography, as well as dealing with second photographers, associate photographers, and any other subcontractors that you might have. Check it out and keep your business safe. Are you ready to take your photography business to new heights? Look no further than PicTime, the ultimate solution for photographers who demand more. Wow your clients with stunning branded galleries that showcase your work like never before. Let your customers preview selected photos on an array of printed goods. PicTime's smart photo store ensures your art shines on everything from canvases to coffee mugs. And take the stress out of marketing with PicTime's automation tools that empower you to effortlessly connect with clients, leaving you more time to focus on your craft. And revolutionize your workflow with PicTime's cutting-edge AI tool that allows you to search and sort images effortlessly, saving you time and ensuring you find that perfect shot in seconds. And that helps you strengthen vendor relationships with precision, curate vendor galleries, sending them just the right images, and enhancing your professional connections. Worried about switching hosts? Fear not. The expert staff at PicTime can seamlessly migrate your photos, making the transition smooth and stress-free. So are you ready to transform your photography experience? Visit nerdyphotographer.com/recommends/PicTime today and discover a world where creativity meets efficiency.
Hey. And now for my favorite part of the show. What's that say? Useless information. This is always death.
But true or false? Saudi Arabia has to import sand.
Oh my gosh, I feel like I heard this somewhere, and I feel like it's true. It's so bizarre, I can't imagine. But maybe it's like a certain kind of sand?
It is a certain kind of sand because their sand isn't good enough quality to make glass. So they have to import purer sand that they can make glass from.
Oh my gosh, that is so crazy. Because, yeah, there's an awful lot of sand around.
There's an awful lot of sand in Saudi Arabia. Kirsten, thank you so much. Where can people find you? Where can they see your work, follow along?
Okay, so you can follow me at my website, which is kirstensmithphotographer.com. And my name is spelled Kirsten Smith, the usual way. Or you can follow me on Instagram or Threads at kirsten.wanders.
I'm going to include all those links as well in the episode notes if people just want to go there and click on it. Kirsten, thank you very, very much for being on. This was a lovely conversation. It made me really happy to see how excited you are about your work and traveling, and it just that sort of thing means a lot to me. You're welcome to come back anytime. If there's anything you want to talk about, I'd love to have you back.
I would love that. Thank you, Casey. It was so much fun.
Welcome back, my nerdy photo crew. I hope you enjoyed my discussion with Kirsten Smith. Be sure to check the episode notes and give her a follow. And while you are at it, if you don't already, be sure to follow the Nerdy Photographer on social media: Instagram, TikTok, Threads, Reddit, and now Blue Sky at The Nerdy Photo. All one word, no underscores, dots, or dashes, at The Nerdy Photo. Feel free to tell us what you think about this or any other episode. Leave your photography-related questions or tell us what topics you would like to hear covered in future episodes. Extra credit is given if you leave a review or tell a friend about the show. Now I'm going to sit back and bathe in the glow of superiority that I'm feeling for having been right about the space whales.
That is easy to say when you do not have to clean whale crap off of yourself.
All that is gold does not glitter, Fib. All that is gold does not glitter. Until next time, everybody, stay safe and stay nerdy.
Who's that coming back to town? You better start listening. Who's your heart been beating about? You better listen.